We're going to be drawing some waterfalls today. All right. And when you're drawing waterfalls, you're going to leave a lot of the paper white because really fast moving water is white water. Today, before I start coloring, I'm going to basically draw it out. I just want you to watch me for a little bit. I'm going to be drawing today. First, I'm going to draw out with a gray marker just so that you can see me a little bit easier instead of a pencil. And then, and I'm also going to be using my crayons to add color and color things in. All right. But before I really start, I want to talk to you about fast moving water. All right. So in a waterfall, we have water up at the top, which is in a lake. So I'm going to kind of put my lake up at the top. Then the water is going to be falling off of a rocky cliff. So I'm going to turn it so it's starting to fall down. And I'm going to let the water fall down. And then when it gets to the bottom, it usually spews up and curls up. So my water is going to bounce around and curl and bounce and curl and bounce. And then after it spews up, it's going to be smaller. So each time it's like when you bounce a ball, first time it bounces really high and then it gets a little bit smaller and then it gets a little bit smaller. And then in the end, it runs back out down the river. All right. So we get something that looks like this. And what I'm doing is just drawing the direction of the line of the water. Now, right now, it doesn't look like a whole lot, all right, until I start to put in my trees in the background, my something large. I can also add into the background a rocky cliff going up and making a smaller tree. I can put a ground line or mountain line into the background and put some rocks on the edge of the cliff. And you can start to see as I start to add in those extra details, everything is going to take shape. All right. So let me show you a few things not to do. All right. And I'm going to do this with a blue because normally when we're drawing a waterfall, a lot of us like to start with blue. So again, if I have that lake coming up, and I curve the water coming down. I'm going to let the water come down. And again, it's a waterfall. So I'm leaving lots of the water white. Really fast moving water is called white water. Then I'm going to let the water spew up and then little spews. And then it's going to come out the river. And I'm going to do two of these really fast because I want to show you a mistake lots of times people have when they're doing this and coming out the water. The mistake is when you go to color it. Here, I would just be coloring the background and basically leaving the water white. But a lot of people like to color in all that water. And what happens is when you color in all that water, instead of leaving the line direction of the water, it ends up looking like this biggie blobby shape. I also think it kind of starts to look like a big vase. All right. So I'm starting to see a vase forming out here, just sort of a fancy vase look, maybe for flowers or whatever. All right. But I end up with a big blob shape. I really want to leave most of this white. So make sure that you're doing that. When I do add a little bit of color to my waterfall, I do just add just a little bit, but I continue like maybe a little purple for coolness into my water. But again, I'm following those line directions and I'm just putting a little bit of water. I think there's a different shade of blue. It's not, well, maybe just a tiny bit of shade of difference. All right, and I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of that extra color into the water. I'm not going to build up the color of the water much at all. All right, it's going to be the background. All right, so let me move back to my original drawing so that you can get an idea of what I'm doing when I start to add my color. All right, so here's my original drawing. You can see where I've been into the background and I'm putting in some rock formations. So I'm going to put another rock. Now, I don't typically make rocks as big circles. That's kind of a funny way to make rocks too. They're not exactly all straight. And if the rock is submerged, it might be pointing out. And any kind of jagged shape, any kind of blobby shape will work for rocks. All right. If they're really close to you, they're going to be great big. If they're getting up the wall, you might have different rocks sticking out of the dirt as you're working up there, that rocky cliff. And then the different ways that you color them in will make that rocks kind of show up. So I want to get some rocks into my picture here. I want another one over here. I want a shoreline coming up this way, going back in, sort of a ground line, maybe another rock over here coming out. So I'm just kind of playing around a little bit with my background. When I start to add color, again, I'm not going to color it all in. I'm going to follow the line direction. So my lake up there, my water turning, and I don't have to stay right on the lines that I drew earlier. I'm just going to add in a few more. My water crashing down, my water spewing up and crashing down lightly. And again, most of it is going to be left white. And then my water coming on out and going around my rocks and coming on out the river. And again, I like to put a little bit of purple in there for the coolness of the water. And I don't put a lot, I just a little bit. Again, even with the water coming out, I'm just thinking about the direction of the line and maybe down into the shadow parts. And I'm not doing all of it, just a little bit, a little bit, a little bit at a time. I could add some more gray or black, or maybe how about a little bit of green, a little bit of blue-green. I can get a little bit more color in there. Because the foliage, if I have a lot of green leaves out there, all of that's going to be reflected into the water. So the sunlight you can put in there. But again, most of that water is just white. I'm going to work on my rocks a little bit. So I'm going to add, here's a sort of a blackish gray. I'm going to add some blackish gray into the rocks. I don't have to color them all in. Onto this cliff, I'm going to put a little bit of gray. I didn't get very many rocks in here. I can go ahead and add some more. And so I'm just going to add the beginning of the rocky cliff. And then I like to add a little bit of brown into my rocks because, there's lots of dirt going around it too. Just kind of fits. Some rocks are kind of brownish in nature. So I can add that into the rocks as well. And I'm just mixing colors together. And that's what I'm going to do and I think I need another one over on this side. So I'll play around with that. I can add a little bit of green moss covering up over top of the rocks. So stick that in there as well. However you want to do that, you're just kind of playing around. Maybe the green grass down below. I can do my mountain in the background. I think I'm going to have a sort of a purpley mountain. There we go. We live in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Sometimes they have a purpley haze to them. So I'll put my mountain coming through the backside there. And then my tree trunks going up. And you can start to see, like, the more I'm coloring, the more I'm adding to this background, the more like a real waterfall it's starting to become. All right, so I'm working and building up the background. And I think I'd like to put a few more rocks down here and grass, so I'll save some room for that. And again, my tree trunk coming up. And I'm just gonna go over top of my my gray that I have there, and maybe even use a little bit of marker that I've got over there. So this is one that I had finished. Now, when I did this one, I used watercolors into the background as I'm working. This one shows you that waterfall coming down into the rocks. But now over on this side, it has what's called a cascading waterfall. And there's a funny light on it. It shows up a little bit better that way. So that's what I want to show you next. I want to show you this cascading waterfall for you to make a choice. All right. So let me grab a new sheet of paper. And again, it is all about the direction of the water line. So I'm going to start again with a ground line way up top. It's like doing perspective. All right, so there's my ground line. And I'm going to start way far away with my river coming out. So I just got a little tiny river. And with that river, then I'm going to have it falling down a rocky cliff. So my water, I'm just going to put a few lines, which way direction my water is going to go. And then it's going to crash. So again, I'm just putting in my crash, then it's going to come out for the river flowing again. So each side is going to get a little bit wider, okay, just like we did in perspective drawing. All right, then this is going to turn and the water is going to crash down again. And when it gets to the bottom, again, it spews off the rocks and twist and turn every which way and then lower twist. And then the river comes back out again. And as it comes out, it gets wider again. Okay, and again, I'm going to turn it as it goes back down another waterfall. I show the direction of the line. And again, I let it crash. This one's not quite as far down, so it's just going to crash a little. And then it's going to come on out, the water maybe right off the edge of the paper. All right, so this is what's called a cascading. It's one after the next, after the next, after the next. But this is done in perspective. All right, so it's really big, close to you, and notice how it's getting further and further and further away. Now, just like with the roads that we did, the more details that we add, large and small, big trees, smaller trees, big rocks. And again, rocks, they're like scribbly shapes. There's nothing right or wrong when you're doing rocks. and smaller rocks and teeny tiny little rocks. The more we add, we can even put rocks in the middle of our waterfalls. So the more rocks that we add, the more details we put into the background, the fancier that gets. And I had one to show you. Let me see if I can find it real quickly. Here we go. Here's one of my cascading waterfalls. So you can see my water's coming from a vanishing point. It's coming down. It's crashing down again, coming down again. Look, I made a little bridge going over top. And over using my ground lines into the background, I've got a little trail that's going to go over top of the creek. Right? So I have a little cascading waterfall. This one I did with paint. And again, you can see my little bridge going over top. I've got some bushes, my rocks. I just let them all smear together. There's no real right or wrong way. And then this is the one that I put them together. My main waterfall and my cascading waterfall and my little path that goes on up the mountainside. All right. So today, try your hand at making waterfalls. All right. Whether you're making them cascading or whether you're making them come straight down, remember, really good waterfalls, the majority of the water is left white. Fast moving water is white water.